Our fourth panel of the symposium related to the opening of the calligraphy exhibition that I hope you all visited yet. Tonight we will be talking about architecture and calligraphy and the relationship between architecture and calligraphy and spirituality to link with the exhibition. The panel will be moderated by Mr. Eric Delpont, Director of the Museum of the Arab Institute in Paris, with the speakers Soumaya Dabar, architect, and Dr. Hani Honeidi, Dr. Eric will present now. Thank you. And the conversation will be in English for anyone who would like to have translation. You may use a headphone at the entrance. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being with us today. And as Virginia mentioned, we will speak of the presence of calligraphy in architecture, ancient and contemporary architecture, mainly, of course, in a religious context. Because it is true that as long as we speak of calligraphy, we already have in mind the halam dipped in ink, and then this halam traces letters, harmonious and proportioned letters on parchment or paper. But we usually forgot that in the development of what we call now the art of Islam, calligraphy played an important role outside what we call the art of the book. And it has to be reminded that the calligraphic style developed in parallel in the art of the books as well as on objects and in architecture also. So I would propose to just to start the discussion with some views of the calligraphic inscription in the ancient monuments. Then we'll have a short presentation of the Gargash mosque by Soumaya Dabar, who is Saudi architect, a woman Saudi architect who certainly in the Arab world was the first to be commissioned devotional building. And also with my colleague Dr. Hani Honeidi, who represent the Al Fawzan Award for Mosque Architecture. And I'm very thankful for both of them to have accepted this discussion, because it will, I hope, give the opportunity to have an insight of what can be calligraphy in contemporary architecture. Because usually calligraphy is considered an art of the past, which is definitely not, and the present exhibition, Scripts and Calligraphy Path to the Soul, prove the innovation calligraphy can accomplish, and even though it respects the rules established since the 10th century CE by different calligraphers. But remaining in the tradition doesn't mean avoiding the progress. And this is maybe in architecture, this is the most evident. So as I said, we start with the ancient styles, and curiously enough, the most ancient dated calligraphic inscription precede what we have conserved through times of the hand-copied Quran. The most ancient are dated roughly by the end of the 7th century CE, but at the same time we had inscription already in architecture, even though we have no testimony of what could be the presence of inscription in the first mosque of Medina and of Mecca, of course, because this building have been redone through the centuries. And what we will see in this ancient inscription in buildings is the use of the first style of calligraphy that we call the Kufi, that is a very squared design of the letter. We saw two examples of pages belonging to the collection of the Museum of the Arab World Institute in Paris, and this is a page from the famous Blue Quran, which has been copied in actual Tunisia in Cairo by the end of the 8th century CE. And at the same time, when the first Muslim dynasty established itself in Damascus, the Umayyad Caliph ordered the construction of the Dome of the Rock. And inside the Dome of the Rock, we have one of the first dated inscription that is of 692 Christian era. And we have other examples ancient. Here we have what we call the Mosque of the Three Doors, also in Kairouan in Tunisia, with a very beautiful Kufic inscription on the facades, even though these facades have been remodeled 2 or 3 centuries after the first construction, especially with the addition of a minaret. And usually in the mosque architecture, inscription develops around and on the mihrab. And here we have a good example of this. This is a stucco mihrab which has been added by one vizier of the Fatimid dynasty, which ruled in Egypt between the 10th and the 12th century CE. And this mihrab has been added in the famous Ibn Tulun mosque that I guess many of you had the opportunity to visit. And here again, we find the presence of the Kufi style of calligraphy, but you will please note that the calligraphy is not the only element we see in this composition, since the verses of the Quran inscribe themselves on a floral and scroll background. And another example from the Mansouriya Madrasa in Baghdad, which has been highly restored at the beginning of the 20th century, but which gives an example of what can be made on brick architecture with the use of stucco. And here we have a panel from a large inscription which has been executed in India by the middle of the 14th century CE. And here it is an example of a sculpture on stone. But you have other way of having inscription in mosque architecture, and we have here example both in the Al-Azhar mosque in Cairo on your right, and in a Damascus mosque dated 14th century on your left. And as you can see, we find in the architectural inscription the same style of calligraphy which were practiced for copying the Quran. And we spoke of the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem, and here we have example of the restoration made by Solomon the Magnificent in the 16th century, which replaced a former decoration in mosaic, which had suffered through the time. And we will finish with this example coming from the Kerouayin mosque and madrasa, which is in Fez in Morocco, with a combining of different styles of calligraphy, because you have a Kufi Maghribi style on the lower panel and the cursive inscription on the upper panel. And apart from the architecture itself, calligraphy also is present also on the different elements we encounter in a mosque, the mihrab, as we spoke, but also the doors. And here we have two examples of panels in wood and in metal, which decorated doors of mosque. From the Mamluk period in Cairo. And another example. And now we'll have a short presentation from the Gargash Mosque by author Sumaya Dabag. And the Gargash Mosque won a prize. It was built in 2021.
Is that right? Can you hear me? Yes. Yes, it was built in 2021. 2 years, actually, this month, end of June 2021. Thank you very much, Eric, for the invitation. And really, I'm very honored to be part of this exhibition as well. There is an image of the mosque in the section on space. And what I wanted to really start by saying is that being included in such incredible artistry, whether it's contemporary or historic, is a real honor, but also I think it's really encouraging that architecture is exhibited in the same way as art. It's kind of celebration, really. I think architecture in Arabic, anyway, being an architect, muhandis or muhandisa ma'mariya, the word is engineer, is really reference to engineering. So. And I think perhaps there's a reflection of regionally how architecture has in the last, I think, 50 years or so, has moved towards sort of being more engineering based than really the art and the artistry that is embodied in architecture. And before we start, I think, what we try as the bar architects, my practice, I set it up, it'll be 15 years this year, and we are really concerned with this intangible element that an experience of architecture can provide. So if you think of the object is something that it needs to be beautiful as well, but I think it's built for people, so it's the experience that the human being is exposed to. That is really important for us because at the end of the day, the experience is what can create a connection to a building and can create a connection to a place. And I think there's a role of architecture that is really important, that is often missed, which is creating a connection, creating a sense of identity to people, and creating a sense of belonging. So these elements are probably, because they're not easy to photograph, although, you know, we're fortunate it's a photogenic building, but really we were after the experience that this project would create, which is really a preparation for prayer. It's a way to find that sacredness internally to prepare you for performing the prayer. So the project really came about, the Gargash family commissioned us to build this in the name of the late father, and they wanted, you know, it was obviously it's a private commission. It's an intimate response to his death. So I wanted to create something that can have that intimacy as well and in experience, but also to create this sense of spirituality, sense of calm. And our approach is to keep really looking at the elements from Islamic geometry and really pare it down to really a minimal look and approach. Predominantly really was to create, is really to play with light. I mean, it's, I think the working title of this project was Mosque of Light, but it's actually the Mosque of Abd al-Khaliq Gargash. But that, I think the name stuck. So really to work with light to create that sense of intimacy once you enter. There is this also shaded area that you enter in, which is kind of a transition from the busy streets. This is surrounded, it's actually in an industrial area, so it was quite gritty. So we wanted to create a haven for the worshippers who are coming to this building. The calligraphy externally was really, I mean, I think we'll talk a little bit later, but there is really obviously the power of the calligraphy, the power of the Quranic verse, the power of those words that is palpable. And we wanted to keep it externally. It was like a band, like a kind of a protective band. So as soon as you arrive, there is that sense of sacredness. The choice of text and surahs was debated quite a lot with the client. But this is really, this is one of the more, I would say, rhythmic or poetic surahs, Rahman, that was selected.
Who made the choice, the final choice of the verses?
The client. Yeah, the client, yes. Yeah. I mean, we'll talk a bit later about the process and seeing how we can fit it and the size, etc. But yeah, it was a client. The play of light with the shadow as you enter also is part of that kind of preparation to enter into a space which is very considered lighting. So there is some lighting through the triangle openings on the sides. There is lighting over the mihrab, which actually, when it's dhuhr prayer, it really lights that up. And then there is indirect lighting through the dome. And I think, really for me, it's the experience of going in there and feeling that sense of sacredness that is really rewarding, because that was the intention and it is felt. Perhaps it's felt through the photography as well. So this is, yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Dr. Annie Al-Unaidi, you are involved in the Al-Fawzan Award for Mosque Architecture, which has been installed in 2011. And could you explain why this award has been think of?
السلام عليكم جميعا. أنا سأتكلم باللغة العربية. يعني جائزة عبد اللطيف الفوزان لعمارة المساجد أسست في العام 2011 على يد الشيخ عبد اللطيف الفوزان، وكان الهدف منها من البداية هو يعني تسليط الضوء على عمارة المساجد ليس فقط في المملكة وإنما في العالم، والنظر نحو المستقبل بالنسبة لعمارة المساجد. والجائزة تمر دائما في دورات، كل دورة 3 سنوات نختار فيها أفضل ممارسات معمارية لعمارة المساجد. ابتدينا في الدورة الأولى داخل المملكة، الدورة الثانية كانت دول الخليج، الدورة الثالثة كانت الدول الإسلامية، الرابعة العالم، وإحنا الحين في الدورة الخامسة في العالم. طبعا الجائزة يديرها جهاز معماري بالكامل، والتحكيم أيضا من المعماريين المشهورين في العالم، ودائما يتم ترشيح المساجد من مرشحين في مختلف أنحاء العالم، وتقوم لجنة التحكيم باختيار الأفضل منها. من المعايير المهمة في اختيار عمارة يعني المساجد الفائزة هو التصميم المعماري. هذا بيدخل في شكل أساسي، وأيضا يدخل في العناصر الزخرفية والداخلية، وعلاقة المسجد مع المجتمع، استجابة المسجد للمتطلبات البيئية. يعني في عدة عوامل تمر فيها لجنة التحكيم، معايير، ويتم فيها اختيار المساجد. راح نعطي الآن جولة بصرية عن المساجد اللي هذا مسجد سنجقلار في اسطنبول في تركيا للمعمار التركي إمري أورولات. طبعا من أهم معايير الجائزة أو شروط الجائزة للترشح أن يكون المسجد بني بعد عام 2000 وأن يكون قيد الاستعمال. يعني المساجد اللي هي قيد الإنشاء لا تدخل في المسابقة، والمساجد التي هي قبل عام 2000 لا تدخل في المسابقة إلا إذا صار عليها أي نوع من التحديث أو الصيانة بعد عام 2000. فهذا مسجد سنجقلار للمعمار التركي إمري أورولات في اسطنبول، وهو فاز معنا في جائزة الدورة الثالثة. وطبعا كان من أهم الأسباب التي أدت إلى فوزه طبعا هو التصميم المعماري، الفكرة التي هي كانت مسجد تحت الأرض، وأيضا العناصر الزخرفية أو العناصر الكتابية اللي فيه بأسلوب حديث. طبعا المساجد الحديثة عموما تواجه تحدي، ما راح نقول، لن نقول انه هذا التحدي سيعيق الاعمال الكتابيه او الزخارف الكتابيه داخل المساجد، وانما هو التكنيك او تقنيه التنفيذ هي التي تواجه يعني اشكاليه في عمليه التصميم، خصوصا مع تطور التقنيات، خصوصا مع يعني ضروره ان يكون المسجد من الناحيه المعماريه ومن الناحيه الجمالية منافسا لأي مبنى آخر، بل يكون هو الأجمل، لأنه على مدى التاريخ الإسلامي كان المسجد هو المختبر أو المكان الذي تتطور فيه الفنون بكافة أنواعها. فسنرى في المساجد الحديثة بأن هناك تطور، حتى صار في طريقة يعني استعمال العناصر الزخارف الكتابية والكتابات القرآنية. هذا في مسجد الأمير شكيب أرسنان في لبنان في بلدة المختارة، وهذا كان مبنى قديم بالمناسبة وتم ترميمه وإعادة تشغيله، وكان يعني لو لم يكن في هذه العناصر الزخرفية الكتابية لكان المسجد ممل، ولكن المعمار اللي هو مكرم القاضي وزياد جمال الدين هم الذين قاموا بتصميم هذا المسجد وإضافة الزخارف والعناصر الكتابية بأسلوب جديد وبطريقة حديثة أضفت على المسجد جمال كان يعني لولا ذلك لكان المسجد في صورة مملة. فجائزة الفوزان تركز على عناصر التجديد وتركز على موضوع مسجد المستقبل ومحاكاة التقنيات الحديثة في المساجد، سيما وعندنا 4 مليون مسجد حول العالم، 90% منهم يعانوا من سوء الوضع وسوء الحال. فالجائزة تأخذ على عاتقها يعني رفع رسالة المسجد بكل أبعادها بما فيها العناصر الزخرفية والعناصر الجمالية. هذا مسجد شكيب أرسنان عند المدخل، طبعا بحسب فلسفة المصمم اللي كان له موضوع الله والأرض والإنسان. طبعا كانت هذه الفلسفة التي قام عليها التصميم المعماري أو الترميم المعماري لهذا المسجد. فنلاحظ ليس فقط الزخرف أو الكتابات القرآنية أو العنصر الكتابي كان عامل مؤثر، وإنما أيضا استعمال المادة اللي هي زي ما احنا شايفين المعدن، والمعدن بيعطي نوع من التضاد مع الحجر القديم الموجود خلفه، فوجود الاثنين بجانب بعض يعطي ثراء لكلا المادتين. هذا المسجد نشوفه في زاوية أخرى، طبعا كلمة الله اللي استعملها المعماري بهذه الطريقة المعدنية لتكون بديل عن المئذنة. يعني حتى في المساجد الحديثة اللي صرنا نشوفها صارت العناصر التقليدية، العناصر المعمارية التقليدية اللي هي القبة المئذنة ابتدأت تأخذ أشكال جديدة. وطبعا هذا الموضوع موضوع نقاش وجدل كبير بين المعماريين وحتى بين المعماريين والنقاد الفنيين وأيضا مع المجتمعات المحلية. في كثير من وجهات النظر لا تؤيد، لكننا نحن متجهين بهذا الاتجاه، اتجاه التطوير المعماري واتجاه اللي هو احترام التقنيات الجديدة التي هي صارت موجودة في العمل المعماري. بشكل عام المعماري لما يبدأ في بروسس تصميم المسجد أو في منهجية تصميم المسجد يأخذ بعين الاعتبار الكتابات، ودائما الكتابات تكون جزء من تصميم المعماري المسجد. المهندسة سمية أكيد في مسجد قرقاش دخلت في هذه المنهجية، ودائما يبقى هناك سؤال، يعني سؤال سأله الدكتور إيريك إنه لماذا اخترتي هذه الآية أو لماذا اخترتي هذا الخط. وطبعا هذه جزء من النقاش والعملية التفكير التي يدخل فيها المعماري عند تصميمه لأي مسجد. دائما يكون العنصر الكتابي الزخرفي مكمل للعمل المعماري، وقد يثريه ويرفع وقد يكون سيء فيخفض من القيمة المعمارية أو من العمل المعماري. لذلك نجد في كثير من المساجد حتى لما يصير عليها عمليات ترميم أو عمليات صيانة أو عملية تحديث يقوموا باستبدال أو بإضافة أو بإزالة نتيجة لآراء ونتيجة ل يعني عملية الحراك الثقافي اللي بتصير بين المسجد وبين المجتمعات المحلية. العنصر الكتابي في المسجد من الناحية المعمارية هو عنصر هندسي مماثل لعملية التشكيل والتكوين المعماري. الخط الحرف له أبعاد هندسية وله ارتفاعات وله توازن وله نسب، والمسجد أيضا له ارتفاعات وله توازن، ودائما كلاهما مكتملين، يحمل رسالة روحانية ويحمل رسالة من هذا المكان ومن هذا المسجد باتجاه الخالق سبحانه وتعالى. طبعا في كثير من العمليات التحديث تحدث حاليا في عملية استعمال الكتابات في المساجد. ابتدينا نشوف في بعض المساجد انه حتى الفنون الضوئية والفنون الرقمية ابتدأت تدخل في العملية الزخرفية داخل المسجد. في طبعا منهم محاولات جميلة جدا، وفي محاولات لساها تحتاج إلى تطوير. يعني في المغرب لاحظنا في جائزة الفوزان أن بعض المساجد هناك ابتدأوا يستعملوا الفنون الرقمية. في الشرق الأقصى في ماليزيا أيضا هناك بعض المساجد ابتدأت تستعمل الفنون الرقمية. فإلى أي مدى ممكن للفنون الرقمية أنها تدخل في عمليات التزيين وتدخل الكتابات المضاءة أو الكتابات الرقمية أو الهولوجرام يدخل في موضوع المسجد؟ هو طبعا موضوع نقاش طويل، وربما يدخل فيه جوانب فقهية ويدخل فيه جوانب شرعية. ونحن في كثير من المناسبات في جائزة الفوزان تعرضنا لكثير من التساؤلات وتعرضنا لكثير من الاستفسارات من المجتمعات المحلية، سواء في المملكة أو سواء في مصر أو سواء حتى في دول العالم. في مؤتمراتنا، مؤتمر العالمي لعمارة المساجد، في دوراته الثلاثة يبقى هناك العنصر الزخرفي في المسجد موضع تساؤل، وكثير من الناس تتساءل يعني لماذا هذا الزخرف بهذه الطريقة؟ لماذا استعملت هذه المادة؟ لماذا استعملت هذه الآية؟ وهذا السؤال دائما على بال أي مصلي أو أي مسلم حينما يدخل أي مسجد. طبعا سنترك لكم حرية النقاش والتساؤل وتقديم أي نوع من الاستفسارات عن المساجد واستعمالات الكاليغرافي واستعمالات الكتابة والخط في المسجد. شكرا.
Merci. Thank you. As far as I know, Sumaya Dabag is the first woman architect to be commissioned the conception and the building of a place of worship. And when you started to think of the construction of the Gargash Mosque, did you had already in mind the presence of the inscription in the building? Or is it something that I imagine at first you think about the spaces, the volumes of the building, the materials of the building, but was the inscribed element already in your mind at this first step of the conception?
I mean, the short answer, yes. I think the title of this exhibition, Paths to the Soul, Dروب إلى الروح, was really, caught my attention. And it's really, the calligraphy was really going to aid that path to the soul through the calligraphy. So it was an integral part of the development of the design. Can I borrow that? Do I go into the next? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And really, the power of calligraphy is what we have noted. So I have a couple of examples of this 15th century calligraphy from a Quranic manuscript. I think also this notion that that was discussed yesterday, that the calligraphers themselves went through a very rigorous training, and they really had to be fit and be worthy of writing the words of God, writing the Quranic verses, which that process really is in a way, it's kind of is very interesting. So if you apply it to, I mean, this is an example I'm borrowing from Nasser Salim. You know, this is a piece that illustrates also the memory and the association we have with calligraphy. For those who don't read the Arabic, it says no smoking. So it's how our association and really the power of writing in that format can also enhance words that are sort of day-to-day signs. We worked with a calligrapher, Dr. Muhammad Farouk Haddad, who wrote I mean, we went through with him through a process. So, you know, initially we defined where we wanted to do the calligraphy, and then we did a number of testing. You know, first we went through the process of also selecting with the client which type, and I think thuluth was something that is associated with the Holy Mosque of Mecca and Medina, so it was selected because of that relationship. And then we went through a number of tests to see what, you know, be legible from a distance, you know, whether in layered or this is what actually ended up selecting. And then we went through a process of, you know, looking at the which surah it was and testing it and seeing what we can fit in with the size. So there is a sort of the scientific element of it at the end. And similarly, internally, we have the two areas, externally and internally, around the mihrab, and again through the similar process. Yeah, so I think that will answer that part.
The choice of the style of calligraphy used in the Gargash Mosque was discussed with the client, or? Yes.
I mean, with the calligrapher, we worked to. We discussed different options, and the thuluth was the one that was sort of favored by everybody, including the calligrapher, actually, which is, I would say, it's kind of the traditional font associated with the mosques in more recent times. I mean, it's in Mecca and Medina.
No, because I saw on the slide you had tested some Kufic or derived Kufic style.
We had just initially looked at all the different ones, and then it was decided.
Because when we see the example of ancient inscription, it seems sometimes evident that Kufic is more adapted to architecture, and especially when it is on stone or in stucco, but for ceramic we prefer cursive styles, of course. Yes. And I guess this is a question you had also in mind.
Yes, and I think also because we had geometric patterns, I think it worked quite well to have the thuluth, because it then created the contrast of the sort of curvature rather than the geometry.
Did you indicate to the calligrapher you worked with the implication of the role of light and the materiality of the stone also, which is completely different from a written text?
Yes, actually, It's not stone. It's the calligraphy or the facade is made out of GRC, which is a glass reinforced cement, which is poured and molded. So it's their molds. The process was that it was written by hand, and then basically traced digitally, and then taken to the factory and molds made out of it, and then the material is poured on top. So it's a very different process to the actual chiseling.
And was he associated to the different steps of the production?
Yes, we were both involved in the different during the production stage. Yes, I can show you here. We had mock-ups made during construction. By the way, all that scaffolding is for the dome. It was quite incredible how much you needed to support before it was built. So this was for just looking at the depth of the projection of the letters. The mock-up externally again was put up to test and see. So it's a continuous process really throughout the construction, that there would be the testing that was done in design is kind of tested as well during construction to see if it does fit the intended.
And what guided your choice to have the inscription engraved rather than embossed in relief?
They're engraved externally, so that again they will catch light, because it was intentional to keep it all in white and not to use another color. And so we wanted for it to be legible. Internally, we wanted to really highlight the mihrab, frame the mihrab, so the gold paint was used, so it was projected.
Those panels were produced
in UAE. Yes.
UAE, yeah.
Yes, it was. A lot of materials were actually produced in UAE because it was built during COVID. Intentionally, we had wanted to be more regional in the choice of materials as part of our sustainability policy, and it really served us during COVID that a lot of this was made locally.
Okay. Well, thank you. And Dr. Rani, another question for you. You are in the kind of in the context of the award. You see many projects, and do you notice a different approach towards calligraphy according the project is related with North Africa, near Middle East and Asia? And do you notice also a difference of the way of creating calligraphy in Arabic or non-Arabic speaking countries?
This is a good question. Yes, there is always a different in approaching the local communities with calligraphy or with artwork in general. There are always a mixture of the local culture and the techniques that being used at each region, and also the content of the work itself. We saw a lot of differences, but I can see that always the differences are very slight, because most of them they are using the Arabic calligraphy, because it's the language of the Holy Quran, and wherever we go, it's respected. We could find, yes, some local languages, but it's not for the decoration or for the inner usage in Quran. It could be done for guidelines or for something related to that. Anyway, in Al-Fawzan, we have at each jury committee an Islamic artist and calligrapher who would be served as a juror, and his job and his mission is to examine and to judge the type of calligraphy used at each mosque, either being long-listed or short-listed or awarded. And of course, it's one of the measures. The Islamic artist always takes in his consideration the local culture, the available material in the region, and it was a debate in the mosque, especially the mosque in Africa or in Far East, because the whole environment there, the whole geography is different there. But if we are talking about the language, it's always Arabic because it's the language of Quran. The material may vary, but the language is still. Also, you know that in the Arabic language we have different style of fonts. The fonts could be different, yes. And in some regions we can see the Kufic is the most used one. In some regions we saw the Thuluth. But generally, most of the mosques, they are using three types of fonts, mostly. The Thuluth, the Kufi, and the Naskh. And we can see here, this is Thuluth, right? Yeah.
And, would you say that the way in contemporary mosque architecture calligraphy is used could be compared or could be an equivalent to what the images were in the Christian buildings?
Even in the, we had a lot of comparison studies with the Christian buildings. I mean, let me call it in Arabic, الضوابط الشرعية, الضوابط الفقهية, that's always be respected in the usage of any inscriptions or any calligraphy in mosque should be respected. And for a certain limit, we cannot compare between the mosque and the Christian building or Jewish building or any other religions. And we do respect, and at any construction process or any design process for any mosque, we have something, what we call it in the fiqh, والثابت. There's something that stick. We cannot change it. And we have the variable, al-mutahawwil. This is the philosophy again. The direction towards Mecca is something thabit. But the design, the material, the culture is mutahawwil. It's something could be changed. The same thing could be applicable for the calligraphy, and al-lugha, the language is thabit. The technique, the font, the material is something variable, mutahawwil.
Can I
yes,
respond? I think, you know, the iconography of Christianity is obviously in Islam. I think Islam is has a very strong oral tradition. The Quran was recited to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the adhan is oral, and I think it's so these words there is a kind of, they have a reverberation, I think. So in my view, I think this is why you have them as an ornamentation for a lot of holy
Could we speak of a calligraphic program for a building, knowing that usually calligraphy will be on the door, on the mihrab, on the minaret, and in the case of the Gargash Mosque, on all the facade, outside facade?
I mean, I think We're actually in the process of designing another mosque at the moment. And
that was going to be my question.
And we have looked at where we want. I mean, I think the calligraphy, it can also enhance the architecture. I mean, they work together. Also where we want to focus people's attention. I think, obviously the mihrab is basically, symbolizing Mecca. So that's the attention where the worshippers are going. But also vertically, that connection to Khaliq, to God, is also to potentially, the base of domes are often used, so makes you to look up. So it's as you mentioned, it can vary from project to project where you might place it.
And how do you start with these new projects? Because I think when you are an architect, an artist, you try not to repeat yourself, and in terms of both spaces, even though we have the model of the mosque with elements which cannot be changed anyway, but how to regenerate, what are the questions you ask yourself when you start for these new projects? Are they in the region or?
Yes, it's in Dubai.
It's in Dubai.
Yeah, it's definitely part of the design process and the thinking process is how do we work with something that is very powerful, as I mentioned at the beginning, that how can we work with it to really create that sense of sacredness in a space.
Does the commissioner want you to reproduce what you have done already? Or
No.
No.
No, I mean, it's a different site, it's a different context, so it's going to be different.
And do you intend to maybe use colors or?
Not yet decided. Will be revealed once the design is revealed.
Would you say that for the region, the color has not to be considered as a major element in the decorative program? Because we know that, for instance, in the mud, in the brick architecture, and the use of ceramic invite to the use of color. Here we are not in a region with a brick architecture. It's rather a stone or new materials which are employed. So the approach to color is, of course, different of what can be done in Asia, for instance.
Yes, we noticed that in some certain communities, the choices of using color, of calligraphy, of material, in Africa they are using sometimes shiny colors, and but in the Arabic Peninsula we are going for the grades of brown or white or some. If we go to the Far East, we can see the blue, the light green is mostly used. It depends on the culture. It depends on the surrounded nature. Yes, it could varies. Again, the techniques, the contemporary techniques, is playing an important role in choosing not only the color but even the whole methodology of calligraphy and the font itself, because some type of fonts it's very difficult to use it or to utilize it in digital art, or it needs more time to program it at any software. And this is the scary part, that we could see something is disappearing and we can see something is evolving. Depends on the technology that is coming in the future.
Okay. And do you consider also the traditional techniques as an element for you of inspiration or influence in the making?
I think what we strive to do is really create a connection to place and time. So I think where it's appropriate, we will, if it's something that is, if that tradition is still alive, then yes, we will, consider it.
You would not be against it?
Yes, if it's still alive and relevant. I think it's really finding what is still relevant, and what is important as well is to create a continuity, not necessarily by
imitation,
by copying what was done before, but really seeing what is relevant to us now, what is relevant to this place, to this particular region, what's available material-wise, what's sustainable, really. I mean, at the end, it's that allowing that art form to evolve with time, and presenting it to what is in the technology that is available today. Sorry?
You said that for the Alfozan Award, calligraphy is a criteria for the choice of the winner. And how do you evaluate the difference between the geographical and area of the projects you are proposed for that award? Because I think it's you have necessarily an Arabic and of course Muslim point of view, but due to the difference of geography, and you have projects also in Western countries which are proposed for the award, and this project might be in that conception far from what is usual to have in the Arabic world.
Okay, now in the process of evaluation and assessment of projects, each mosque will be nominated by a nominator, from the country itself. So this nominator is supposed to be aware about the local culture. This is step one. Step two, if this mosque be shortlisted, then the jury committee will send a specialized technical reviewer to visit the site and to meet the architect and to meet the local community and to meet the municipality where the mosque is located, and to prepare a detailed study about everything in the mosque, including the decoration and the calligraphy. And then this study will be submitted to the jury committee. And in particular, each juror, because we have at each jury, we have the architects, we have the interior designer, we have the artist, and we have the anthropologist or the sociologist. So the process of evaluation is passing through 4 or 5 stages. And each one of the jurors will give the assessment and will give the verdict based on his experience. Of course, we are selecting always as experienced jurors, and based on the local culture that is written in the report that has been prepared by the technical reviewer. So the judgment of selection and awarding is respecting everything during the process, including the local culture, including the local materials. For example, in Bangladesh, it's very hard to find calligraphy or inscriptions, very hard. But you can find some kind of pattern in the bricks that they are using in the walls. So they are presenting another alternatives for art. They are using, but in a very slight and minor thing. And the contemporary, if you go towards Pakistan, you will find the mosque is rich of calligraphy. The Islamic artist within the jury, he knows the local cultures, he knows the local art, and he can judge based on that.
Okay. And Sumaya, would you consider to include calligraphy in non-places of worship?
It's a interesting question. Just being in this exhibition made me think of where it could be implemented. But I think some of the contemporary work that is being done at the moment, with Lara and Noor yesterday, really made me think it's a very interesting process that also has a lot of thought and meaning, and it can have, there's a power to it. So perhaps after this exhibition, I might consider collaborating with somebody who's
and
like
if
that.
If it's not in inscriptions themselves, could you imagine to have the use of letters for the plan of a building?
In the form, you mean, the form?
Yeah.
It really depends, because at the end, we're creating spaces, so I think the form has to really respond to what is required in that space, potentially using a sort of letters may be a bit restricting in my view, but I don't know.
Yeah, this is what we are talking about, the legitimate guidelines, because using the Quranic verse on the ground, it's not allowed from the legitimate part, because it could be insulting for the verse of God.
I was not saying having a building on a plan based on a Quranic.
And general.
Just a letter.
I never saw something like that. It could be done in using one font, for example. I saw it in some of the mosques. They're using harf al-ha. In the calligraphic way. Sometimes I could see it if they are having a certain or specific celebrating, for example, any other occasion, but not Islamic one. They could use it.
Okay.
Yeah. Then sorry, I think I missed that. I think poetry definitely has. A lot of potential to be used in certain.
This is the case, for instance, in the Alhambra in Granada, where you have many poetic verses.
Yes. No, it's beautiful. Yep.
I don't know if there are any questions in the assistants. Yes. The mic is coming.
فرحات طشكندي جمعية العمران. عندي سؤالين، سؤال موجه لجائزة الفوزان والسؤال للمعهد العربي. عندنا في العمارة الجمال ينقسم إلى قسمين، وهذا كان خلاف كبير بين الكلاسيكيين والحدثيين. الجمال لذاته والجمال لغيره. أعتقد أن كل الخط هذا يعني يرجع إلى القسم الثاني اللي هو الجمال لغيره. يعني أنت تأخذ أشياء لتجمل فيه المبنى، وهذا يعني يخالف العمارة الصريحة بالنسبة للمودرنست الحدثيين، لأنهم نقموا على الكلاسيكيين ومن الافانغارد اعتبروا أن الزخرفة جريمة على أساس أنها يقطع الصلة مع الماضي، مع الجرافيكس اللي كانت موجودة في الكنيسة، الكتابات والتماثيل والزخرفة. وطبعا أنا ما أتكلم عن الناحية الفقهية لأن في آراء مختلفة من الفقهاء. السؤال الثاني، أنا أبحث في الكتابة من قديم عن الخط وشغل الخط. سؤال موجه لمدير المعهد العربي أيضا، هل مر عليك أن نحن نعرف أن القرآن منزل، فهل الكتابة كانت مصاحبة لهذا التنزيل أو أنه اخترع بعد من خبرتك في هذا المجال؟ شكرا.
Well, as long as the revelation has been put in writing, we notice that since the oldest pieces that we know, that a particular attention has been paid to use an harmonious and proportioned writing. I don't know any copy of the Quran which would be in a daily script. The fact of copying the Quran implies to do it in the better script your hand can produce. This is not like writing a letter, and it is usually considered that calligraphy was born with the copying of the Quran, and copying of the Quran either in manuscripts but also in the usage of verses in the architecture. And I wanted to react to what you said regarding decoration. I don't, for me at least, I don't regard the presence of calligraphic inscription on and in buildings as a mere decoration. And this is certainly what is the force of the arts of Islam, that the fact that we use the writing rather than the images is more meaningful to the entire community, which who has maybe the feeling of a particular belonging.
You associate the development of writing with the beginning of writing the Quran. My question was, in this case we will say, like the other historian said, that the Arabic word is not original. It's we got it from other neighboring areas. From my reading, we know that the Quran revelated from God. So my question, do you come to your knowledge that the origin of the writing and the scripts, it's from that time, it's old. In the Arabic we call it qadim, okay, as the Quran is qadim. Or it is, as you said, it's developed 14,000 years.
Arab script existed before the birth of Islam, and but what we notice that as far as copying the Quran is considered, there is a particular attention paid to the way the copy will be executed, and from the 2nd century Hijra onwards, you have many treatises explaining how to have what we call the art of beautiful writing, and why there must not be a confusion between writing and calligraphy. Calligraphy is an art, writing is a practice.
هل تعتبر الكتابة هي من الجمال لغيره؟ يعني في هذه الحالة نفقد الصراحة المعمارية في المباني أو في المساجد، يعني ولا سمن نتكلم نحن الآن على دروب الروح. يعني الإسلام هي يعني دعوة روحية، ما هي مادية، ما هي من الماديات. فأنت تريد أن تعطي هذا الإحساس القادم للمبنى اللي هو المسجد، فإشغاله بالكتابات. ونعرف كثير من فقهاء المسلمين يعني منعوا أو يعني قالوا بعدم جواز كتابة آيات القرآن على المساجد. فكيف أنت في جائزة الفوزان تعتبر الكتابة والخط أحد الكريتيريا لاختيار الفائز؟
هو الكتابة والخط أحد العوامل أو نسميها العناصر التزيينية الداخلية، لكنها هي ليست الأساس. وطبعا الموضوع هذا محل زي ما تفضلت حضرتك نقاش حتى فقهي. جائزة الفوزان تعنى بالجمال أينما كان وكيفما كان ومن أي ثقافة، فنحن لا نتدخل في القضايا الفقهية أو في القضايا الشرعية، نحن نتدخل أكثر في القضايا الجمالية. وإذا جيت لرأيي الشخصي أنا أقول الجمال لذاته والجمال لغيره كلاهما يعني يجب أن يتم يعني نحترمه في أي عمل فني في المساجد، لأنه الجمال لذاته هو لله سبحانه وتعالى، والجمال لغيره هو لنجعل زي ما تفضلت حضرتك جو المسجد أو فراغ المسجد فراغ روحاني. نحن طبعا في كثير من الآراء نرفض المغالاة في استعمال العناصر الزخرفية والتزيينية، وربما يعني حتى في المساجد الحديثة نرى هذه الظاهرة ابتدأت تأخذ منحى آخر، وابتدأت حتى يتم فيها نوع من الاختصار للعناصر الكتابية والزخرفية. لكن زي ما حكيت نحن لا نتدخل أبدا في المواضيع الفقهية.
هذا مو موضوع فقهي، يعني الجمال لذاته. يعني زي ما قالت المعمارية سمية، هي اختارت الكتابة بشكل غاطس لاستخدام الظل والظلال، اللي هو هذا أحد المقومات لعمارة الحداثة.
نعم.
لكي يخرجوا من الزخرفة اعتمدوا على الحجوم وعلى النسب وعلى الظل والظلال. يعني ممكن أشياء كثيرة تكون جميلة لذاتها، مثل المرأة هناك نساء ما يلبسوا الحلى ومع ذلك جميلات.
نعم.
وبعضهم يلبسوا الحلى ليجملوا أنفسهم. ففي فرق بين
نعم.
الجمال لذاته ولغيره، ليس ما نتكلم عنه لله عز وجل.
زي ما حكيت قبل شوي أعطيت مثل في بنغلاديش المساجد تخلو تماما من العناصر الزخرفية أو الجمالية، ويعتمدوا على الجمال الفراغ بحد ذاته. وبالمناسبة في أكثر من دورة مساجد بنغلاديش كانت تفوز لهذه الغاية. يبقى في الأخير قرار استعمال العناصر الزخرفية والتزيينية، ويعود زي ما تفضلت حضرتك، هل المسجد بحاجة إلى شيء يثري هذا أو يزيده جمالا أو لا، فهذا هو قرار المعماري المصمم.
And this is the force of Islamic and calligraphy, which is meaningful for even people not practicing the language. And I'm ashamed to say that I'm not Arabic speaking, but I can feel, I can sense the power of the writing, and Islamic calligraphy is worldwide renowned for this force.
Yeah. Good evening, Marwan Basmaji, architect. I have three questions. anyone could grab it and answer it. When we start to addressing it, Dr. Eric, where we draw the line between calligraphy associated to a religious building and calligraphy associated to non-religious building. We know, especially in our libraries, there is one landmark in Warsaw, which is a library, where calligraphy spread across the whole facade of the building. So what could change in the use of calligraphy in that typology? Because what I like, Sumaya showed a slide, ممنوع التدخين. So this is not a religious-driven motif, but it associates as a type of calligraphy. So how the calligraphy is impacted on a building which is not religious? That's one thing. Other question regarding the mosque, the beautiful mosque that Sumaya showed. And excuse me, Dr. Rani, right, the name? Dr. Rani? Hani, afwan. You mentioned about the mosque in Lebanon. You said that if there was no calligraphy, the building mumil, it's dull. It's quite interesting because I would like to hear from you, again, where you draw that line between an interesting architecture, religious architecture, or not interesting. And if you want to apply this on Sumaya's mosque, what do you think about that balance between the calligraphy and the mosque? If you take the calligraphy out, is it a beautiful mosque? Would like to hear your opinion as well. And last question to Sumaya. For me, it looks first as a stone, but I was surprised that it's cement and the glass GRC. So the question is, don't you think, because this is a signature piece in this mosque, this calligraphy, as surat, there was no discussion about making only this piece in stone by sculpture and artists doing it, no matter how long it takes time, or it was a decision from beginning, it should be like the rest of the facade? Because I believe it could be really interesting to have this imperfection in that piece of calligraphy on this mosque. Thank you.
Well, just a word. Our panel discussion of this evening is, of course, related to the subject of the exhibition. And we speak of calligraphy in a religious building. But it is evident that in the entire Arab world and even Islamic world, calligraphy has no frontiers between the religious and the profane. And the fact that there is no frontier is not a modern phenomena. It has always existed since the 7th century.
No, I'm aware of this fact, but my question is, what is, in your opinion, what could morph in the calligraphy when it is applied to non-religious building? That's what I meant. Is it the font? Is it this?
Well, I think calligraphy brings what we call in French une valeur ajoutée, whatever the subject. And it is something to appeal to the aesthetic sense of the person who look at this calligraphy, even though he can't read it.
عودة لسؤالك بخصوص مسجد شكيب أرسلان في لبنان، التصميم المعماري معادلة جمالية ويدخل فيها النسب ويدخل فيها كثير من العوامل. مسجد شكيب أرسلان بدون هذه الإضافات كان عبارة عن مبنى أفقي بشكل كبير، فالمصمم بإضافة هذه العناصر قام يعني صنع نوع من التوازن بين الأفقي والعمودي، وقام باستغلال أيضا هذه العناصر المضافة باستخدام بعض الكاليغرافي. نأخذ بالحسبان كمان أنه حينما بني المسجد في السابق كانت المباني كلها مباني يعني صغيرة الحجم نوعا ما بسبب تقنيات الحجر. الآن نرى بلدة المختارة صار فيها مباني مرتفعة، فهو وجد أن هذا النمط أو هذه الإضافات ربما تحاكي التحديثات التي ليست حدثت في المسجد فقط وإنما أيضا في كامل المدينة أو في كامل البلدة. فالعنصر المعماري كان هو السبب الأساسي، وإضافة العنصر الكتابي هو يعني لإضفاء جمالية على هذا المسجد.
To answer your question about the materiality of the calligraphy, in fact, it was very intentional. We wanted to keep that external facade kind of pure in the same material. In fact, we did use stone on the inside of the cut section where the shading is. We used the Omani stone, but it was to really distinguish that from the exterior. But yeah, it wasn't intentional to maintain the same materiality. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for this beautiful speech and allow me to speak in Arabic. كخطاط وباحث في الخط العربي وأيضا في العمارة وتخصصي، فاستمتعت جدا بالحوار حول النقاط الجميلة اللي ذكرتوها وأيضا المداخلات. فقط عندي مداخلة يعني ممكن تفيد الزملاء الرائعين اللي سألوا هذه الأشياء حول ارتباط الخط بالعمارة. ارتباط الخط بالعمارة سواء كان عربي أو غير عربي، فهي فكرة استخدمتها الحضارات القديمة كلها حتى قبل العرب وقبل الإسلام. لو نلاحظ في الحضارات القديمة زي قدماء المصريين أو الإغريق أو غيره، بنلاقي نقوش الخط موجودة في عمرانهم، حتى وإن كان الخط هذا قبل ما يصير أبجديات كرسم صوري أو غيره. الجميل في الإسلام إنه دائما كان أي شيء جميل مورس قبل الإسلام فالإسلام كمل فيه. واحدة من مقولات الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم إنما بعثت لأتمم مكارم الأخلاق. فبالتالي استخدام الخط مع العمران ظل العرب يستخدمه سواء قبل الإسلام، وعندنا أمثلة للمعلقات اللي مثلا نذكر التاريخ إنه في المعلقات الشعرية وهي شعر نص ليس مقدس أو شيء، وكانت تكتب وتعلق على الكعبة. وأيضا بعد الإسلام في صلح الحديبية هناك قصة إنه وثيقة الصلح اللي كتبت بين الرسول محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وقريش في ذاك الوقت هي علقت على الكعبة وكتبها الصحابي علي بن أبي طالب. مرورا بأول في القرن الأول الهجري استخدام آيات من القرآن على جدران المسجد النبوي كانت في عهد الوليد بن عبد الملك، فهو أمر خطاط اسمه خالد بن أبي الهياج أن يكتب هذه الآيات على جدران المسجد النبوي. واستمر استخدام الخط إلى يومنا الحاضر. الجميل أيضا إشارة الاستخدام، كان الفنان لما يستخدم هذا الخط مش استخدام عبثي ولكن يكون له مفهوم. فبالتالي لما يستخدم الخطوط مثلا في الأماكن المقدسة للمسلمين اللي هي الكعبة أو المسجد النبوي وحتى مسجد قبة الصخرة، كان استخدام رمزي، بمعنى إنه الآيات اللي تكتب على الكعبة هي آيات لها علاقة بمكة، بمقام إبراهيم، بالحدث أو بالمكان. الآيات اللي اختيرت لتكتب في المسجد النبوي كان لها علاقة بهجرة الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم والأنصار والمهاجرين وغيرهم من هذه الصفات. آيات اللي كتبت في مسجد قبة الصخرة هي آيات تخاطب الأديان السماوية، كون مسجد الأقصى هو موجود في منطقة تحتضن هذه الديانات. فحتى أيضا كان ذكاء من الفنان المسلم أو الخطاط في اختيار نوع العبارة. وأختم بفكرة أنه أيضا الاستخدام ليس فقط كان استخدام على المباني الدينية عبر التاريخ، فعندنا أمثلة كثير لاستخدام الخط العربي في الأسواق، وكانت تختار عبارات تشجع على الكسب والرزق والعمل زي الكاسب حبيب الله إلى آخره. أيضا كان يستخدم مثلا في أماكن القضاء بذكر العدل وأشياء تتحدث عن العدل وغيره وغيره. حاليا فنستطيع أن نستخدم الخط العربي في العمارة في عدة منتجات معمارية، مستشفى، في المحكمة، في السوق، في المباني الجميلة الأخرى، وليس فقط محصور على دور العبادة. وهذا المفترض مننا كمعماريين وكخطاطين أو كخطاطين يتعاملوا مع المعماريين، أن توجد هذه المساحة أن يظهر الخط بشكل أكبر، لأنه حقيقي عنصر يمثل الهوية ويضيف معنى للمكان. وأنا أشبهه بالضبط زي فكرة استخدام الإشارات حاليا أو فن التصميم الجرافيكي أو شيء، نفس الكلام قد يترجم على المبنى بطريقة أو بأخرى. فالمجال أعتقد أنه واسع وكبير جدا، ليس فقط محصورا ب يعني استخدم بها الخط ولا لا، الموضوع أحسه أبعد من كده. وشكرا لكم ولوقتكم، وحقيقي تحية على هذا الحوار الرائع.
Thank you.
مرحبا جميعا. صراحة شكرا لكم على هذه الندوة وعلى هذا الموضوع أعتقد يعني الخطاطين ويعني المعماريين. كان سؤالي للدكتور هاني ومهندسة سمية بخصوص أنه كيف ممكن للتجارب الحديثة اليوم للمعماريين أن تخلق تجربة جديدة للخطاطين في ممارسة الخط داخل المساجد من غير ما تكون بالطريقة يمكن نقول المألوفة أو المعروفة بوضع الشريط سواء في الواجهة أو سواء على القبة سواء على هذه التصرفات، واللي أعتقد أنه هذه تاريخيا ممكن احنا كمعماريين وخطاطين للوهلة الأولى يعني حيجيني تصور لما نعرف إنه المسجد واشتغل معاه خطاط وكذا، فعلى طول حيكون عندي يعني تخيل واضح لإيش ممكن المتوقع حيكون يعني. فكيف ممكن للإمكانيات الحديثة والتجارب الجديدة للمعماريين واليوم ما وصلنا له ليه من طرق نقدر نتخيل فيها الشكل المعماري أن تضع الخط في موضع كمان متقدم وكمان يعتنى به كجانب من جوانب التصميم أيضا.
شكرا على السؤال، سؤال مهم جدا. الحقيقة عمارة المساجد كثير مربوطة ب lot of regulations في المنطقة، فما في الحرية التامة الواحد لتجارب زي ما أنت بتقول، يعني إنه هذه التجارب ممكن الواحد يشوفها في المباني يمكن غير يعني ما هي مساجد. I think definitely الأخ هنا كمان كان بيقول إنه يعني ليها a lot of applications. ف يعني ممكن ظن إنه الواحد المعماريين يبدأوا يستعملوا الخط ويعملوا يجربوا فيه في مناطق ثانية في الأول and hopefully that will influence maybe الطريقة إنه الكاليغرافي بتستعمل في المساجد.
إضافة إلى ذلك عملية التصميم المعماري دائما هي يعني تخضع لعوامل، يعني المعماري لما يبدأ في عملية التصميم هناك عوامل بنسميها بلغة العوامل المحلية، وأيضا يخضع نسميها الظروف العالمية المحيطة. فإذا شفنا في مسجد سنجقلار في اسطنبول اللي عرضنا قبل شوي، بنلاحظ أسلوب الكاليغرافي يختلف عن الطريقة الشريطية اللي حضرتك تفضلت فيها بسبب أنه طبيعة المكان وطبيعة الزمان وخبرة المعمار الذي قام بعملية التصميم اضطرت أن يستعمل طريقة جديدة. هو كان يرغب بالتجديد وكان يرغب في طرح فكرة الكاليغرافي والخط بطريقة جديدة، وبنلاحظ أنه استعمل فقط هذه العبارة فقط في مكان واحد في المسجد، لأنه حتى لا يكون هناك نوع من التعددية أو التكرار التي ممكن أن تكون مملة، فهو استعملها في مكان واحد بأسلوب جميل بنسب درسها بعلاقة الخط مع المكان. وهذه طبعا نتيجة للظرف اللي هو أو نتيجة للخبرة اللي هو ونتيجة للمكان اللي هو كان موجود فيه.
يعني ما أعرف إذا باقي وقت أقدر بس أضيف تعليق على يعني زي ما ذكرت حتى في هذا المسجد يعني كان استخدام الخط هو برضو كواجهة يعني لسه ممكن يكون جزء متوقع، ولكن ممكن زي ما ذكرت حتى الدكتورة سمية هذا التقارب بين المعماري والخطاط يقدر ممكن يخلق تجربة جديدة هي صعبة ممكن شوية أو يعني ما انحطت في مكان للاختبار والفحص لخلق تجارب ممكن أكثر يعني. شكرا.
One last question because
excuse me, can I add just for this writing? ظهرت الكتابة في المباني منذ القدم. يعني المسلمين استخدموا الحروف الأبجدية مو الهجائية، الحروف الأبجدية لتأريخ قيام المبنى. فلو تروحي المباني القديمة تحصلي فوق الأعتاب أو في أماكن مكتوب بيت شعر، آخر سطر منه يعبر عن تاريخ يعني بناء هذا. وهذا موجود، أنا شفته في مناطق كثيرة، وأيضا على الشواهد حق القبور. يعني لما رحنا الربع الخالي لمنطقة الفاو وجدنا الكتابات هذه موجودة. فاستخدام العرب للكتابة في المباني قديم جدا، يعني من العصر الأول، يعني ما هو جديد يعني. I mean the أبجدية. الأبجدية is to give a value for each letter. أبجد هوز حط لي كلمة. So they used to use this letter with the equivalent to it by number in the buildings to give a date of the beginning of the construction of this.
Each time it will depend on how the writing is executed. I mean, on a tombstone, on a profane building, you can have writing and you can have calligraphy. And it always depends on the program or the wish of the commissioner of the building. And for instance, if you take the Mamluk period, you have many beautiful inscriptions in perfect calligraphy with a profane content. It's not necessarily reserved to the expression of religious sayings or verses. Yeah. This is what we call the foundation text.
I think this exhibition and really the all the artistry that is being exhibited here, I think it's a really big invitation to create more collaboration between the designers and calligraphers and architects. I think this is probably missing a lot in the region, and it doesn't have to be limited to mosque architecture. I think it's really open to any. So I think definitely I'm going to go back with that in my mind for our next projects. So thank you for that.
Thank you.